Good afternoon, students. So it's been a long time we've all met. So we have completed with the theory part and then we've started prescriptions and CCRs. So this is our last prescription and 2 CCRs. So we will discuss about 1 prescription and 2 CCRs today. So coming to the prescription. So prescribe drugs for a case of congestive cardiac failure. So before seeing the drugs which we have prescribed here, let us discuss in brief about what is cardiac failure. So heart failure is something when the heart is not able to contract properly. So there is a decrease in the cardiac output. So whenever there is a decrease in the cardiac output in the body, so there are 3 compensatory mechanisms which happen to increase the cardiac output. So what are those? First one will be activation of the renin-angiotensin system. Then second one will be cardiac remodeling. Then the third one is sympathetic discharge. So all these 3 compensatory mechanisms, they occur to increase the cardiac output. So we know that what happens in the renin-angiotensin system, there is decrease in the renal perfusion. So why does the RAS system get activated? Because initially there is decrease in the renal perfusion because of decrease in the cardiac output. So the decreased renal perfusion, what does it happen? When there is decreased renal perfusion, there is release of angiotensin 1, then which gets converted to angiotensin 2, and this angiotensin 2 stimulates the secretion of aldosterone from the body. So what are the actions of this aldosterone? So this causes sodium and water retention. This has a vasoconstrictor effect which increases the preload and the afterload. Then there is sodium and water retention. Then it also aids in cardiac remodeling. That is, there will be ventricular hypertrophy which will facilitate in the increase in the pumping action of the heart. So now all these are occurring to increase the cardiac output. Then again, there is increase in the sympathetic discharge. So whenever there is a decrease in the cardiac output, there is increased sympathetic discharge that stimulates the beta-1 receptors in the heart. So, and also the adrenaline, it has a vasoconstrictor effect. So again, there is increase in the preload, afterload, and increase in the force of contraction and increase in the heart rate. So again, all these compensatory mechanisms, they act together mainly to increase the cardiac output. So initially, though there is increase in the cardiac output, eventually they may overburden the heart. That may again result in failure. So now what is the presentation in a heart failure patient? So there is edema. So all this ventricular failing, so the heart fails, so that it is not able to pump the blood properly. So the blood is retained back in the heart. There is back pressure which is exerted in the body as pulmonary congestion, hepatic congestion and peripheral congestion. So because of pulmonary congestion, there will be dyspnea, cyanosis and cough. Then because of peripheral congestion, there will be generalized edema in the body and a septa. Then there is distension of jugular veins. Okay. Then there is tachycardia. Then because of hepatic congestion, there will be enlarged liver. Okay, enlarged liver, anorexia, nausea and vomiting. So these are the, so this is how heart failure occurs and what are the symptoms that present during heart failure. Now in brief about what are the drugs which you can give for heart failure. So there are 2 groups. So drugs which act by positive inotropic effect and the drugs which do not act by the inotropic effect. So what are the drugs which have positive inotropic effect? The first are cardiac glycosides, digoxin, digitoxin, Oavane. Then we have phosphodiesterase inhibitors like milrinone, inamrinone. Then we have levosimendan. Okay. Then we have beta-adrenergic agonists like dopamine, dobutamine, dopexamine. So all these act by increasing the contractility of the heart. Then there are other groups of drugs which have a different mechanism of action rather than increasing the contractility of the heart, like the diuretics. So diuretics, we have bumetanide, furosemide, hydrochlorothiazide, spironolactone. Then we have AC inhibitors like enalapril, lisinopril, ramipril. Then we have beta-adrenergic antagonists like bisoprolol, carvedilol. Then we have vasopressin receptor antagonists like conivaptan and tolvaptan. Then we have vasodilators as well like hydrolazine, sodium nitroprusside, isosorbide dinitrate. So all these are the different groups of drugs which are used in the treatment of heart failure. So which is the AC inhibitors in fact are the first choice drugs for heart failure. So which particular combination is very helpful in treating a heart failure patient is give a digoxin, an AC inhibitor and a diuretic. Okay. So this is a prescription for a person with heart failure. So tab enalapril 10 mg BD or tab ramipril 1.25 mg OD or BD. Then tab digoxin 0.25 mg OD. Then tab spironolactone 50 mg 1 tablet to be taken in the morning. See now this is the triad which like improves the effect in a heart failure patient. So how do they act? Digoxin, we know it increases the contractility. So here, why do we prefer? See, even though AC inhibitors are the first choice drugs, it is preferred to combine spironolactone with AC inhibitors. So that is because, see, AC inhibitors, how do they act? They act by inhibiting the conversion of angiotensin 1 to 2, and so angiotensin 2, it cannot stimulate the secretion of aldosterone. So angiotensin 2 is not there, aldosterone is not there. So apart from this, what is one more beneficial effect of AC inhibitors is they not only provide symptomatic relief, they also help in modifying the disease pathology. So what is the disease pathology that is occurring here? Cardiac remodeling is occurring. There is hypertrophy of the heart musculature. So AC inhibitors, they prevent the cardiac remodeling to occur. So that's the reason this drug is very useful, because not only symptomatic relief, it is also preventing the cardiac remodeling. It's the same with spironolactone. See, spironolactone is a diuretic. So why do we prefer spironolactone rather than other diuretics is, see like loop diuretics like furosemide and bumetanide. So if you give those, how do they act? They act by increasing the diuresis. So what happens? There is relief in the pulmonary edema. So excess fluid in the body is being removed by diuresis. So the pulmonary edema, it gets reduced. So there is decrease in the edematic effects which the person has been facing, like dyspnea, cough, all these symptoms will be relieved. Okay. So even though these loop diuretics, they are providing symptomatic relief, they do not affect the disease pathology. So, and in addition to that, one more disadvantage of these is they cause a very high disturbance in the electrolyte balance. Okay, the electrolyte balance in the body is disturbed. So that might lead to side effects like arrhythmias. So in order to overcome all these, spironolactone is a better diuretic which can be combined in the treatment regimen along with AC inhibitors. So diuretic spironolactone, so how does this act? This is an aldosterone antagonist. So it is directly blocking the action of aldosterone. Okay. Then one more thing is this also prevents the cardiac remodeling to occur. So this is a very effective diuretic which can be combined in the treatment regimen. Then one more reason why spironolactone should be combined with AC inhibitors is, see, AC inhibitors, they are preventing the conversion of angiotensin 1 to 2. So 2 is decreasing the secretion of aldosterone because it is a stimulus for secretion of aldosterone. See, the aldosterone which is circulating in the body, it is not only because of stimulus from the angiotensin 2, there are other sources of aldosterone which is being secreted in the body. So now when you are giving AC inhibitors, so sometimes what happens is this aldosterone escape occurs. So even though there is no angiotensin 2 in the body which is stimulating the aldosterone secretion, there are some other sources from where aldosterone is being secreted. So that is what we call aldosterone escape. So now that is the reason you're giving spironolactone, because it is an aldosterone antagonist. So it directly blocks the aldosterone effect. Okay. So is it clear? So that is the reason we combine spironolactone with an AC inhibitor. So the treatment regimen will be enalapril or ramipril along with digoxin and spironolactone. Okay, so this is about the prescription. Then coming to the CCR, criticize, correct and rewrite the following prescription for a case of insulin dependent diabetes mellitus with hypertension. Okay, so here what treatment is given here? Propranolol 40 mg tablet single dose and regular insulin 40 units IV daily before each meal. So here, what is propranolol here? Is it a cardioselective beta blocker or is it a non-selective beta blocker? So I hope you are answering from that side. It is a non-selective beta blocker. So it blocks both beta 1 as well as beta 2 receptors. Okay. So normally when a insulin dependent diabetic mellitus patient is taking an antihypertensive drug, he should be very cautious, because see, whenever a person is dependent on insulin, see, there is a chance that he might forget his meal and take a dose of insulin, or there could be an overdose of insulin that might result in hypoglycemia. So whenever hypoglycemia is there in the body, it is a stress situation which stimulates the release of adrenaline. So what does this adrenaline do? So how do we recognize that there is a hypoglycemic attack in our body? Okay, so because there is a stress situation and there is release of adrenaline in the body, so what does this adrenaline do? It will go and act on the beta 1 and beta 2 receptors that will present as tachycardia, sweating, tremors. So because of which we can know that we are having a hypoglycemic attack, and then we can take glucose water or take a chocolate piece so that we have to regain the glucose level in the body. And also one more thing that occurs by when adrenaline is released is, adrenaline also goes and acts on the beta 2 receptors in the liver. So that results in glycogenolysis in the liver. So glycogen is broken down to glucose and that is released into the blood to help aid in the hypoglycemic situation. So apart from this, this alone is not sufficient. So when we have tachycardia, sweating and tremors, so we additionally take glucose water. So all this will replace the hypoglycemic symptoms. So now what happens when a person is taking a non-selective beta blocker like propranolol for hypertension? See, he's a diabetic patient and hypertensive, so he's taking propranolol. So propranolol, we know that it is a non-selective beta blocker which blocks both beta 1 and beta 2 receptors. So when they are being blocked, so whatever adrenaline is released in the body, it cannot produce these symptoms like tachycardia, palpitation, tachycardia, sweating and tremors. So you will not know that a hypoglycemic situation is occurring in the body, and then you won't take any measures like consuming glucose or eating a chocolate. So then there is a very high risk for the person. So what we have to do, we have to take either a cardioselective beta blocker, or in fact AC inhibitors are the first choice drugs for insulin dependent diabetic mellitus patients. Okay, so that is what is written here. Propranolol is a non-selective beta blocker. It is contraindicated in patients of insulin-dependent diabetes mellitus. So in this case, if it is given, it prolongs and increases the insulin-induced hypoglycemia by blocking the beta 2 receptors. So is this sentence clear? It prolongs and increases the insulin-induced hypoglycemia. So because it is blocking the beta 2 receptors, the hypoglycemic condition in the body is being prolonged. You are not able to recognize that hypoglycemia is occurring in your body. So it is prolonging the insulin-induced hypoglycemia. See how it does? It is written. It masks the signs and symptoms of hypoglycemia by blocking the beta 1 receptors in the heart and beta 2 receptors in the liver, because it blocks the adrenaline-induced glycogenolysis. Adrenaline acts on the beta 2 receptors in the liver and causes glycogenolysis to occur to stimulate the release of glucose. So propranolol is blocking the beta 1 and beta 2 receptors. So here we prefer giving cardioselective beta blockers like atenolol, which selectively blocks beta 1 receptors. So one advantage of this is tremors and sweating can be felt, but still palpitation cannot be felt because it is blocking the beta 1 receptor. but still it is not blocking the beta 2 receptors in the liver, so the glycogenolysis also is not being affected. So relatively atenolol is better when compared to propranolol, but the choice of drug will be AC inhibitors such as enalapril. So drug of choice for controlling blood pressure is an AC inhibitor such as enalapril. Then again, what insulin he is taking? Regular insulin, 40 units IV daily before each meal. So here the dose is correct, 40 units per ml is correct, and also the frequency is correct because it is a short acting insulin. It should be given before each meal, but the route of administration is wrong. How it should be given? So the route of administration is always subcutaneous. So this is about the CCR on insulin dependent diabetic mellitus patient with hypertension. Then comes the next one. Okay, so this is the correct prescription. Okay, till now we have discussed the criticism. So if we have to see the correct prescription, so that is injection plain insulin 1 vial. So 1 vial contains, it's a 10 ml vial. So 1 ml is equal to 40 units. Depending on the blood glucose level, insulin injection is given before each meal. Then tab enalapril 2.5 mg or atenolol 50 mg orally once daily. And 1 tablet is to be taken daily in the morning, follow up after 1 week. So this is the correct prescription. You can copy it down later. Then criticize, correct and rewrite the following prescription for a pregnant lady suffering from hypertension. See, hypertension in pregnancy is a very significant complication. So that results in maternal morbidity, then perinatal morbidity and mortality. So when can you say that a person is hypertensive in pregnancy is the systolic should be greater than 140 mmHg and the diastolic blood pressure should be greater than 90 mmHg at least on 2 occasions separated by 4 to 6 hours. So if it is there, then you say it is she is hypertensive. So now what should be the aim of treatment in a hypertensive pregnant lady with hypertension? So you should be able to prevent the maternal complications like cerebrovascular complications or cardiac complications, and at the same time you should see that the uteroplacental circulation is not compromised. Okay, so that should be the aim of your treatment. So hypertension in pregnancy can present as a preeclampsia or eclampsia, or gestational hypertension or chronic hypertension. So gestational hypertension is something because it's what you say, like when normally in pregnancy what happens in the first 2 trimesters there is a drop in the blood pressure. So when it comes to 3rd trimester again they regain it to the preconception level. But then what happens in gestational hypertension is the blood pressure in the 3rd trimester will be higher than the preconception level. So that is what we call gestational hypertension. Then if this hypertension gets cured after pregnancy, it's fine. Then if it doesn't get cured after pregnancy, then we term it as chronic hypertension. Okay, so now definitive treatment for pregnant ladies suffering from hypertension will be termination of delivery. But then that is not necessary because we have a good number of drugs which are available with which we can see that the pregnant lady is fine as well as the baby is fine. So what are the different drugs which you should avoid and what are the drugs which you can give in pregnancy? So here the treatment given is tab hydrochlorothiazide 25 mg OD, then tab enalapril 2.5 mg. So can you give these drugs? See, what is hydrochlorothiazide? Hydrochlorothiazide is a diuretic. Then what is enalapril? Enalapril is an AC inhibitor. See, all these topics have already been covered to you. So you should be knowing whether you should give a diuretic and an AC inhibitor to a pregnant lady. So I hope you know the answer. So you should not be giving a diuretic or an AC inhibitor. So why? Why you should not be giving? Because diuretics, they decrease the uteroplacental perfusion because they decrease the volume, blood volume, okay, because they induce diuresis. And then AC inhibitors, they affect the fetal kidneys because they cause hypertension, anuria and renal failure. Okay. So both diuretics and AC inhibitors are contraindicated in pregnancy. So diuretics, they decrease the blood volume. So there is a decrease in the uteroplacental perfusion and there is an increased risk of miscarriage. So there is risk of fetal wastage and placental infarcts may occur. So that might result in miscarriage. Then AC inhibitors, they cause fetal hypotension. So that results in anuria, and anuria is decrease in the urine level and or there is no urine. Anuria and renal failure in the fetus. So what are the drugs which you can prescribe in pregnancy? So you can give methyl-dopa. It is a centrally acting antihypertensive drug. Okay, it's a symptomatic. It's centrally acting. Then we can also give labetalol, which is an alpha and beta blocker. It's a combined blocker. Then calcium channel blockers, slow releasing nifedipine can be given. So tab methyl-dopa is the first choice drug, 250 mg, 12th hourly. Then if in case labetalol also can be given, if it doesn't get control with one drug, methyl-dopa can be combined with labetalol as well. Then again, if there is a acute emergency, severe hypertension which needs to be controlled immediately, or if the patient is being posted for surgery, then the choice will be IV, labetalol or hydralazine. So you can give those. Then if there is eclampsia, eclampsia is when she gets seizures along with hypertension. So then we give MagSulf infusion, magnesium sulfate infusion. Then for that you need to, after giving that, you need to be monitoring the magnesium levels in the body. So what are the preferred drugs in pregnancy with hypertension? Tab methyl-dopa, labetalol, calcium channel blockers, slow release nifedipine. Then we can also give hydralazine in acute emergency and also labetalol through IV route. And the last one is in eclampsia, magnesium sulfate infusion. So this is about the prescription and CCR. So please copy them later in your practical book. And tomorrow we will discuss again 2 CCRs. So one is about cough and the other one is about I think iron deficiency anemia. Okay. Thank you.